Building the Skills for Rapid Career Growth. I love this session because this is all about what are the jobs of the future related to automation, including developer, but not exclusive to developer. It's a really fascinating conversation about what are those jobs, what are the skills, and what are the career opportunities. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keith Edwards, VP of Intelligent Process Automation at Fiserv, and Tommy McAvoy, Lead Associate at Booz Allen Hamilton.
Oh, we got the clicker.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Anybody win it big here in Vegas?
If you're here right now, you didn't hit a jackpot, right?
That's
Here
right.
to talk about your careers. Nobody won $1 million last night?
Nope. Cool.
Keith, take it away. You want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, I'm Keith Edwards. I work at Fiserv, and that's not Pfizer. There's a lot of confusion with that, especially with all the stuff here we've been hearing, but we're in a fintech industry. And we've been using UiPath for about 3.5 years or so. And just some background how I got into this industry. About 3 years ago, the platform was actually started by Sydney Prescott, who was on the stage earlier today. And when she went to new opportunities, they were looking for somebody to run the team. And at that time, I was doing IT cost allocations and things like that for our CTO. But I saw this growing tool, this environment, this thing looked really, really cool. And I wanted to be part of it. I didn't care what I had to do. I went to my boss and said, I may not know the whole structure here, but I want to be in on this. And I want to take this and push it out to the team. And she saw my desire and she handed the team to me. And since then, we've been growing the platform within the company. At that time it was First Data, and then we got acquired into Fiserv. And we've been building it ever since. And hopefully today we'll talk about some of the different type of roles within the group and some of the careers coming into it. Because most of the workforce coming into automation wasn't schooled in automation per se, right? And when I went to school, there wasn't anything like this. So you had different skill sets, and now they're entering into something like this, like I did. And we'll be talking about how those different roles will play into that team.
It's really cool that you got in the ground floor of this one. You saw kind of where the industry was going, the potential for the capability, right?
Right.
And you saw I want to be a part of that. And that's a lot of our folks are, a lot of our colleagues are. They get on the ground floor there and they build it up, and the groundswell, the momentum for it is really amazing. Sorry, I forgot to talk about. My name is Tommy McAvoy. I am the Director of Automation for the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz Allen Hamilton. We're a federal contractor to the government. Our teams are really excited to be working with the federal government for automation. There are, as many of you could probably imagine, your tax dollars at work, some of the processes are ripe for automation. There's lots of potential for the government to increase efficiencies in all elements of their operation. So we're very fortunate to be working with some fantastic clients, that the CTOs and the CIOs that also see that potential for automation. They get it. There's a lot of folks that are the young CIOs or the young CTOs as well that have some programming background that really kind of see where RPA and automation can really take them. So it's very exciting to be working for the federal government these days. I never thought that I would say that, that it would be exciting to be working for the federal government. All right, let's get into this.
Oh, you want to ask a question first? Maybe. There he goes.
Oh.
So how many people here are developers? Just show of hands.
Any developers?
A couple? Yeah.
Only a couple?
Oh,
all right. now you're speaking my language. Let's go.
And I guess everybody else has some type of other background, and that's where I came in as well. Like, I don't have a development background. I know some IT components, but when we talk about automation, even when I took over the team, my boss started saying, I want to start pushing out more bots to everybody. More bots. And the answer was, before I even can answer, was, I want you to go get more developers. More developers equals more bots, like it shows on the screen here. But that's a misconception, right? There's a lot more to it, but that's what everybody thinks. If you throw a bunch of bodies at it to make the bots, you're going to get this very successful program, and then the world will be happy. So the next slide here. Now, this is the reality of it, right? You have all these different components of this team. I always gravitate towards a sports analogy, rugby or football, where you have to play as a team and win as a team. And on those teams, you have different skill sets, right? You can't, it might be interesting, but a football team of all kickers isn't going to be very successful, right? So you have your skill positions, running backs and things like that. And the same thing applies for a career path and a team to be successful with automation.
There's, we hear all the time, right, that developers obviously a very important part of the equation. You can't really do much of this without having really highly skilled developers, but the ecosystem around automation is, understanding that is so important, that it's not just throwing a couple developers at the problem.
Right.
The business analysts, the understanding the advocacy that you need for automation, it cuts across multiple business units. You're going to need the CIOs, the CTOs to be bought in, information assurance folks, and then also just program managers and project leads that understand the vision of what automation can bring.
Yep.
Right? It's not just a, hey, let's just code this as a solution. There's so much more to it than that. And I think one of the things we really want to get across today is, not just the developer focus, right? That's obviously important. Everybody understands in order to build bots, you need to have that. But there are so many other roles, in the environment to be able to really build yourself a career, right? You don't need to have a coding background. I do not have a coding background. I am not technical at all. Right? I went to a small liberal arts school and got way too many concussions playing football, so you do not need to have a technical background to be successful in the automation business. But understanding where you can go with automation is really is kind of the thing that I think is missing in a lot of teams.
Yeah.
It's always the more developers equals more success. Well, yeah. I think you and I have both seen that's not always the case.
No, and I mean I have colleagues who say, hey, I want to do something with automation, but I don't know how to code. I don't know this, and but you have other skill sets. And when we go to the next slide, you'll see some of the roles. In this one colleague I'm thinking about, she was a PM. And it's like, that's perfect. I have a need for a type of PM. And what you see on the slide here, I should also say it's a framework, right? If you think of ITIL and things like that, it kind of sets the stage, but your company's culture and your company's structure may change this up a little bit. For example, Tommy helped build this slide. I should have took a closer look. I don't like the word change manager on here. I don't like it. Because in my mind, in my background, change means change records, incident, problem, change. So we have a different terminology and things like that. And that's okay, right? It just shows how the different cultures are. But for the PM, that will be a good spot there. You want to have somebody who's going to be connected to the whole automation end to end, where it could be the interface from the business to the different components of the factory that's building the automation on the backside. So, it's a she. I told her you may not have the technical side to build it, but if you're able to project manage and push the automation along and know a little bit about what the automation can do and the tech behind it, you'll be fine. You have an opportunity, and you should apply yourself if you want to come into RPA. So that's just one section there. And as you go down the list, business analysts, that's another one. There are basic components for all business analysts where you're, requirement gathering and things like this. And this is where your PDD gets created. But I also look for business analysts that are really inquisitive and they ask really probing questions, because part of the time when you're taking that PDD, it's not going to be the same way when the bot's going to be running it, right? For example, we had a use case when we had a new business analyst or jotting down all the notes, and in the process they said, bot needs to go to shared folder on desktop user X. Well, the bot's unattended, it's not going to be able to get to their desktop. This should have been a flag, right? So if you're inquisitive and you have that background to look for the requirements and build the PDD and think like potentially how a bot would run, that's a role for you as well. So.
You don't have to be the person that puts hand on keyboard to code everything, no. Right? But understanding what automation can do, understanding the limitations of RPA is very important. Right? You never want to automate a bad process,
yep.
Right? But you first have to understand what makes a bad process, right? So there's so much more than just developers. I think we've said that a couple times already today. There's so much more than just developers. But you look at some of these roles, this framework is not all inclusive either. There's definitely some centers of excellence roles that we're probably not including here, that we should probably update the slide. Understanding change management procedures, understanding just what are the rules for this process, how do we make this optimal, how do we optimize this, how do we make things more efficient. That doesn't necessarily have to be a developer for that role. Some of the best projects that we've had have 4 or 5 different types of people that have the EQ and the IQ, right? We talked yesterday about that unicorn, the person that can have a little bit of understanding of the development side, but then also that business analyst side, understanding what the desired outcomes should be, and then how to get there. How do we set make a path for that?
Yeah.
And then we can work with the developers to really make that happen. And it's very exciting when we talk about what are automation teams going to look like in the future, right? It's a PM that really understands where automation can go, where automation can take you, but then also business analysts that are just they've been a part of multiple iterations or multiple projects that have that type of experience. I think we're just seeing this within the federal government right now. It's really picking up steam. But the successes that the government's going to have is when you've deployed multiple bots, when you've done this at scale. That's really where we're going to be seeing a lot of success in the near term. Is hey, people are doing this and they're doing it right.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not just throwing developers at the problem.
Yeah. And I guess the last couple at the bottom there, that's where I think the unicorns are, because in these roles, it's a little more support. And that's important to me. When I deploy a process and it starts, bumping in the night or something's going down, I'm all hands on deck. I've been paged many times a night to come on and try to fix something. But the unicorn here is somebody who kind of understands the development process and the IT infrastructure, right? Because there could be an issue with the firewall or the server could be having some type of pop-up message. You have to go in there, have to figure it out. And that's where the unicorn person will come in and be able to see both aspects and troubleshoot and get their thing resolved as quickly as possible. So, from a career perspective there, if you have an IT background, an infrastructure background, this would be a great place for you to slot yourself into, an ops side of the house. You can learn the code enough to say, okay, this is a bot problem, now I need to page out the developer or third level support. Or, for the infrastructure side, what do I have to do, reboot the box or something like that. And they're also important to get the infrastructure ready. And it depends how your companies set yourself up for infrastructure readiness. I know some companies, that's strictly an IT function. They'll open up a request for them. In our company, it's a little more blended and gray. We support everything from the OS up, and IT takes us from up to the OS. And a lot of times there's like, well, is it OS or is it application? And we'll work close together on it. That gives us more flexibility. So with that type of IT background, this would be a good place to have a career within automation, because that's super important, right? Everybody wants to automate everything, but once you put that bot on the server, that server now isn't a desktop, right? You got to open up the firewall, you got to install that program, and hey, that program only works on desktops. Now, how do you virtualize it and things like that? So it's a bunch of components. Now we kind of skipped the architects. That could get really technical, but it's also kind of fun because you're also laying out the roadmap of the group, right? You're looking at what's coming out new. We talked about the new features and things coming out with UiPath. We're trying to structure ourselves to be a little less RPA and more automation. And we're going to have a service catalog of all the different things we could do for automation. So when the customers come to us with a problem, we say, here's your solution. And they don't have to care if it's RPA or BPM or just even in some type of basic Python script or something like that. So in that technical architect role, you can apply all those different components and also help with the solution design of how the automation should run. So it's another avenue for careers.
I tell you, the solution architect is really an exciting position.
Yeah.
It really is. I think that person also has a little bit of a development background, maybe not a hardcore Python developer necessarily, but understanding where automation can take you. And like Fiserv, at Booz Allen, we really want to brand ourselves as a broad automation team, and that includes artificial intelligence, that includes machine learning, RPA, and it's all on the spectrum of automation that we want to be able to provide for our clients. And the exciting thing about working with UiPath there is that the ML and AI integration that we're seeing. And the solution architect, that role is really understanding what tools are going to be available, what capabilities are available to solve these challenges, right? Our client challenges. And that can be very difficult. That presents its own challenging. It's keeping up with industry as well. It's having your finger on the pulse of where's industry going with this. So a lot of that's, hey, UiPath, where are we going? What new features are we going to be rolling out with the next iteration? Like, where are we going to be going, with a partnership with them? It's very exciting to see where automation is going to be, especially within the federal government in the next couple of years. I think there were some organizations that were a little late to the table. They heard about it, but then there's a lot of requirements for, you can't, those infrastructure SMEs, we had a lot of conversations of, wait, what's a bot? What are you putting on my server?
Yeah, the Terminator, yeah.
It's not going to be Skynet, but we had to convince a lot of people that that's not the case.
Yeah, security, that's a whole nother, that should probably be a role in itself, bot security. And your good point about UiPath and tools with their cloud solutions and SaaS and things like that, they do make it really easy for somebody to jump in from a different career path and come in there and say, oh, I understand how to make an ML and then make it into an activity to be bring down into your code. So that's one of the good features of using a partner like UiPath.
You know, you brought up a good point about the infrastructure, support teams, right? So it's not, you don't necessarily go to school for automation to support that, right? So the cloud experts, but they are still a part of the ecosystem. I think that's when we're seeing that sometimes it's overlooked, right? You know, everybody's again focused on developers. I need developers, right? But there's so many more roles to, as we look at the slide, there's so many more roles to make an automation team successful, and the infrastructure folks are people you cannot overlook.
Yeah.
They are so important. They're the ones that they make the trains run on time, right?
Yeah.
They are
rails.
just invaluable resources.
There's not a problem until it's a problem.
Exactly, right? Yeah, that's the long snapper, folks. That's the you don't know the long snapper's name until he botches a field goal for you. But so a question for you, Keith. As we got a couple of minutes left here, for the folks in the audience, like when you're looking at hiring for these different roles, like what is it that you're looking at on a resume or an interview? Like what kind of questions are you asking these folks? That intellectual curiosity, I know, is something that you're really looking for.
That's a good question. So I mean, a little background obviously helps in whatever field it is. But when I interview and read a resume, I'm looking for somebody who's a go-getter and wants to solve problems and wants to learn. Because in this industry right here with the buzzword hyper-automation and everything, whatever we have today is going to change tomorrow. And we're going to have to skill ourselves up to be flexible with it. And so I really look for that tone when I'm talking to somebody to say, okay, you may have a business analyst background, but are you able to ask those good questions to understand what that process is? Or, oh, I see you're an architect. What's the future hold? How are you going to adapt to our roadmaps to make sure we're providing all the different solutions with AI, ML, things like that? So that's one of the key things I look at first, and then I start drilling down into the past history, how many years experience and things like that. But that's super important to have that person who's really hungry and wants to learn and be flexible with the changing environment.
It's so important to have that agility with just the semper gumby, right? That something's always going to be changing. When we're looking for to bring people on, it really is that are you going to be flexible? Do you have how rigid are you? Because this is an industry where it's going to be constantly changing. But I think that's exciting, and for people that are coming into the automation game, there's again, there's so many different roles here. You don't have to have that development background, but look at the different opportunities that you can have, and you can build a career for yourself. And we talked about it yesterday, Keith, but how many people have been able to transition to some of these roles, right? You start out as a developer and maybe you want to be more focused on the solution architecting, or you're a business analyst, but then you have a little bit of development background, so now you can focus on that. Building a multifaceted kind of part of your career here is being, there's a lot of different opportunities in different firms that, hey, those people there's a lot of opportunities for folks with these on your resume, that's for sure.
Yeah, in the company or a different company. We have attrition, right? I'm not thrilled about it, but it's still, they get the skills and then go off and, get another job someplace else. So it's good to have this information. And even if you're not going into an automation role, it's probably good to know this stuff anyway, because you're probably going to be dealing with the bot on the other side, right, as a business. So to say, I may not know automation, but I know how it works and I know how to support the bot and work with it is another good thing to have on your resume.
Certainly there's the folks that are building the bots, but then being on the receiving end of, how do I operate this? Right. How do I, what's the own end, the operations and maintenance for all this? How do I, work with my digital assistants, on a daily basis? That's a question I think in the next couple of years, a lot of people are going to be asking is, what's your familiarity with bots and automation?
Yep, absolutely.
And it's, as we have a lot of people here at the conference, and the exciting part is, this is only going to get bigger. But automation is going to be commodified. It is. The people are going to be asking you on your resume, like, oh, you don't know about automation? You don't know how this works? Now that's going to be, it's not going to be a differentiator anymore. Right now we see resumes that, there's lots of automation stuff. Come on, let's, how fast can we bring you in? How quickly can we hire? And I think that is also very exciting for people that are, in the job market. I think we talked about the Great Resignation, right? There's a lot of analytics about people leaving and finding more gainful employment in other places. I'm very excited about that. That's something where having these types of roles on your resume, it really opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah. We kind of skipped the developer too. So we should also say, if you have development background and going into UiPath or something like that, .NET and things, that obviously helps, but also UiPath has that great academy program to go out there and teach yourself. I don't have any development background, but I was really curious about Studio X, so I said, let's do it. So I watched a couple of videos. I have some processes now. I have a thing that approves all my timesheets each week, which I should probably look at it more closely before I approve them, but at least I got it automated, right? And I learned that through the academy. So you can transition yourself, and through our self-serve, I have a colleague in here too, strong background in development, and she took a couple courses in UiPath, and now she's developing on her own with Studio, actually, so not Studio X, but Studio. So that's also a place that you can transition yourself into with development background or no development background like myself.
And certainly for the program managers and the project leads, it's very helpful if you attend a Build-A-Bot session, or if you can see what the automation is supposed to be providing. So myself, again, non-technical, you go to a Build-A-Bot session, and you're like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
People can do this. You understand, but then also it's understanding what those limitations are with automation, right? It's, we talked about the intake process and the prioritization. That's the building blocks of your COE, right? And it's so important to be able to have that skill, be able to say, okay, am I asking the right questions, to be able to determine whether or not a process is a good candidate for automation. And I think sometimes that gets lost, and it's just, again, it goes back to the developer focus, like, oh, well, coders are going to fix all of this. But it is the EQ and the IQ combination that really makes automation teams successful.
Yeah. So just last couple minutes, this is just how my organization is structured, and just kind of give you some thoughts for it. I guess the right side there, that's that automation lead, PM type of role, and they're the face to the business like we're talking about. So the ideas come into this person who would work with the business to kind of get some ideas to see if it's feasible or not, and also help them optimize or take them in a different direction, or start pushing them through the process. And that's why you have that arrow going across there. So there's a stickiness all the way across. So you have the business has one person to work with all the way through. And then you start getting to the traditional roles we're talking about there. And I should say within each tower here, you have the junior, middle, senior role, and then you can start branching out to more technical versus manager type of roles, depending on what you want to do. But you have the architects there, R&D, roadmap, things like that, analysts, all the way down the stack there. And for us right now, we're keeping democratization off to the side. There's a lot of aspects already within each one of these towers, but there's so much movement going on right now, and there's so much involvement working with the end user. We thought it'd be best to keep it as our own tower. But eventually it may branch across and just kind of bleed into the areas you already have here. So this is just how my organization's being structured today, and just kind of give you some thoughts behind that.
Keith, I love this framework, because it really drives home the point of there's so many different roles to play on the team, right? You got a lot of quarterbacks here, but there's plenty. You need linebackers, you need running backs, you need offensive linemen who don't always get a lot of the credit. But it really drives home the point that there's so much more than just, all right, give me a developer and some time, and we'll build you a bot. To be successful, you need to have this framework. I think organizations would really, the good ones are going to take this type of framework and say, okay, as we build out, as we look to hire, this is what we need, right? Everybody has, certain skills with each of these roles, right, that you're looking for, and that is really going to separate the organizations who are really doing this at scale, and the ones who they're going to do a couple pilots, and then maybe it's not going to be successful because they don't have the expertise that you have with this framework at Fiserv. And I think that's what's going to be separating the organizations that can do this well, are the ones who really understand this and drive this home. So yeah, no, I love looking at this one. I love this slide.
Cool, great. So we'll be around afterwards if you guys have any questions. I think that covers it, right?
I wish we did have some time to do a Q&A, but we weren't allowed. We definitely wanted to do that for just like shout out questions of like, what do you guys want to hear? But yeah, Keith and Tommy will be hanging out in the back if you have any questions for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.